Okay, as soon as you have npm installed, npm install -g, that means it's going to make it global so that you can use it in other places other than your current location. Truffle. And Truffle is a whole toolbox of things that are used for building and developing and managing Solidity and Ethereum installs. Where this is not the only tool we're going to install, but this will get us started while this installs. And Truffle can also be used, I think I mentioned this, for deployment, so that once you've built something with Truffle and you've tested it locally, you can turn around and deploy it to something like Rinkeby testnet if you want to use Rinkeby as your testing outside of the local test environment that you have. Or if you set up your own Ethereum node or nodes, you can use Truffle to install contracts in those, as well as being able to use Truffle to install in the production. So npm run that. So there's lots of things in Truffle, and Truffle can also act as okay, I've created a separate directory where I'm going to build my code in. Now that I've got npm installed and I need to do the rest of the installs that we're going to use, I think the only global one is Ganache CLI, which we'll also install here in a bit. But what I have to do is I have to start out with a package.json file. And I don't really have to put a lot in it. It is JSON. I think you have to have name, colon, and whatever you want to call this, my demo. And you have to have a version. And it is 1.0.0. That has to be the minimum there, and then you can do npm init, I think. Okay. And it will now prompt you for a bunch of stuff, and you now have a more complete thing. I think I typed ls in there. Is this okay? Yes, I'll just hand edit it. Package.json. This is not ls, it's eta demo. Once I have that, then I can start actually installing stuff, and it will track it in the npm when I tell it to save it. So npm install I think I want to just say save, not save development. My G Ganache CLI. And as I'm doing these things, it's going to probably tell me a bunch of times that there are fixes that I needed to do, but we'll just walk through them. And this will build up the information in that package file so that if I made a copy of it in some other location, I can just do npm install, and it will install all the components. npm is actually a pretty decent package manager. My only complaint against it is that we have far, far too many little tiny JavaScript packages. And if you look at something like React, you've got 20,000, 30,000 packages that you end up installed. And how do you keep track of, from a production development perspective, 30,000 pieces of other people's software? But doing the job that it does a very good job at it, and there are lots of npm packages that extend way beyond the scope of just JavaScript stuff, so it's very useful. A couple of those that we are going to deal with in terms of this is we are going to have truffle assertions, which is a little package that allows us to do some stuff in testing. And we want to also use the Open Zeppelin testing and libraries. Open ZPPELN. Contracts, that's the actual library with their stuff and the test helpers. We need to be able to tell it to wait for the next block in our test system before we proceed on, so that we can simulate the behavior of time in our test system. And that comes from the Open Zeppelin test helpers. The contracts that we're going to build are actually going to come from the Open Zeppelin libraries. The nice thing about Open Zeppelin is it provides a fairly comprehensive set of tests, and that set of tests, or a set of contracts, includes all the stuff that we want to play with, like ERC 777, ERC 1155. All of these contracts are tested, they're security reviewed, and available to us. The last thing we need is the Web3 library, which allows us to interface to web pages from our Ethereum code. And I typoed, it has an @ sign at the beginning. There we go. And there's a file that I'll provide you that has all of these in it, so you don't have to be like trying to copy this from the video. And the last thing, npm audit fix, not gix, audit fix. There we go. So it'll fix the known security vulnerabilities that it can. Okay. Hopefully at this point we actually have Ganache. We should try it. If all goes well, it will actually start up a Ethereum node. This Ethereum node is at a specific location that it's telling us. It's on our local host at 8545, and there are a bunch of accounts when we start this up. These accounts should not be used ever in a production environment, as everybody gets the same accounts with the same password information every single time from Ganache. But it's given you 10 accounts with 10 private keys. And given the private keys, we can actually derive a public key for these. There is a way to go from a private key and add a public key. But this gives us the capabilities of doing a server. It has some configuration and some gas limits, but this would actually allow us to go and test stuff when we're ready. Now I'm going to Control-C from this and stop it at the moment. That was a good demo. It prints that out every time when it starts. Usually I save that in a file, because if I've got to use these accounts someplace in something to make something happen that I'm working on. I'm testing transferring 2 ETH from one of these, like this BBF3 account. I want to test transferring or a transaction. I'm going to need that information about the public and private keys for that. So that is very useful, but at this point we want to set up a project, and so we want to do something like truffle init. And you'll notice that now we have a file called demo. And inside that we have some other things: contracts, migration, test, and truffle config. The first thing we've got to deal with is we got to go into truffle config. And we've got to find the section that says something about network. Right there, development. And we are going to be doing development, so we've got to uncomment that section on development, so that when we actually go and take something and we want to run it, the default network it's going to connect to is development. That's going to be our Ganache CLI. That's the correct information for it, 127.0.0.1 at that port. And I don't know what the network number is, but a star for a network number means connect to any network. If you have multiple networks that you are using, like you have a test and a production network, you really do want to use that network number so you never connect to the wrong network. So when you're testing, you get certain your tests go to your test network, and you're not actually burning up Ethereum that costs money. But for what we're doing for development, whatever the network number is, I'm not even going to bother looking it up. It was probably on that previous screen. It makes no difference. That will work for that. So we're going to have one window where we run Ganache, and then we can actually start doing stuff with Truffle in the other window. As soon as you get your basic tools installed, Ganache and Truffle, okay, you've got all these other things to make certain you install. And once you get your installs done, there is this list of files, okay, that you need, and these files are checked in with a set of lecture notes for 15, also with the assignment. To contract goes into the migrations directory. This tells it which contracts to load when it doesn't migrate. Employee vest is your base contract that has a bunch of things that are not complete in it. It has to-dos, which you can go find, and those are the things to implement inside there. Package.json is a copy of my package.json file. You should end up with the same package.json, so you may not want to copy that in, but you may want to do a diff if something is going on and see if I have something different than what you have. By creating an empty package.json and doing these installs, you should end up with the same thing. I don't guarantee it. If there's a difference, copy it in. Truffle config has the correct configuration in it with the uncommented lines, and then I've provided you with 2 tests. The tests are not complete. You're expected to add your own tests for stuff, and there's a bunch of stuff in there to test. So we're going to be looking more at the tests and filling out the other pieces of code, but there are 2 tests, and those go in the test directory. So make certain as you're going along that you copy in or start using these files as you need it. And that's where they go in the structure inside your assignment.